Michael Bay, the prisoner of cell 25. Chapter 1. Have you found the last two? The voice on the phone was angry and coarse, like the sound of car tires over broken glass. Not yet. The well-dressed man on the other end of the phone replied, Not yet. He put on his dark glasses even though it was close to midnight. But we believe we're close, and they still don't know that we're hunting them. You believe you're close? There are 2 children among a billion. Finding them is like finding a lost chopstick in China. Is that what you want me to tell the board? The well-dressed man's voice rose. Remind the board that I've already found 15 of the 17 children. I put out $1 million bounty on the last 2. We've got spiders crawling the web, and we have a whole team of investigators scanning global records for their whereabouts. It's just a matter of time before we find them, or they step into one of our traps. Time isn't on our side, the voice returned sharply. Those kids are already too old. You know how difficult they are to turn at this age. I know better than anyone, the man said, tapping his ruby-capped pen on his desk. But I have my ways, and if they don't turn, there's always cell 25. There was a long pause, then the voice on the phone replied darkly, Yes, there's always cell 25. Chapter 2. The Beginning. It's not like I was looking for trouble. I didn't have to. At my height, it just always found me. My name is Michael Bay, and the story I'm about to tell you is strange. Very strange. It's my story. If you passed me walking home from school, you probably wouldn't even notice me. That's because I'm just a kid like you. I go to school like you. I get bullied like you. Unlike you, I live in Idaho. Don't ask me what state of Idaho is in. Newsflash. Idaho is a state. The fact that most people don't know where Idaho is exactly why my mother and I moved here, so people wouldn't find us. But that's part of my story. Besides living in Idaho, I'm different from you in other ways. For one, I have Tourette's syndrome. You probably know less about Tourette's syndrome than you do Idaho. Usually when you see someone on TV pretending to have Tourette's syndrome, they're shouting swear words or barking like a dog. Most of us with Tourette's don't do that. I mostly just shrug and blink my eyes a lot. If I'm really anxious, I'll also clear my throat or make a gulping noise. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes kids make fun of me. It's no picnic having Tourette's, but there are worse things that can happen to you, like having your dad die of a heart attack when you're 8. Believe me, that's much worse. I'm still not over that. Maybe I would never be. There's something else you don't know about me. It's my secret. Something that scares people more than you would believe. That secret is the reason we moved to Idaho in the first place. But again, that's part of my story, so I might as well tell it to you. Chapter 3. The Armpit. Mr. Dahlstrom's office is as good a place to begin as any, or as bad a place. Mr. Dahlstrom is the principal of Meridian High School, where I go to school. If you ask me, 9th grade is the armpit of life, and there I was in the very stinkiest part of that armpit, the principal's office. I was sitting in Mr. Dahlstrom's office, blinking like crazy. You could guess I'm not fond of Mr. Dahlstrom, which would be stating the obvious, like saying breathing is important, or Rice Krispie squares are the greatest food ever invented. No one at Meridian was fond of Mr. Dahlstrom, except Miss Duncan, who directed the Glee Club. She had a picture of Dahlstrom on her desk, which she sometimes stared at with soft, googly eyes. Every time Dahlstrom came over the PA system, she would furiously whack her baton on the music stand to quiet us. Then, after he said his piece, she would get all red-faced and sweaty, and remind us of how lucky we were to be led through the treacherous wilderness of high school by such a manly and steadfast defender of public education. Mr. Dahlstrom is a bald, thin scarecrow of a man with a poochy stomach. Think of a pregnant Abraham Lincoln with no beard and a yellow toupee instead of a top hat, and you get the picture. He also looks like he's 100 years old, at least. When I was in 5th grade, our teacher told us the easiest way to remember the difference between principal, an underlying law or ethic, and principal, the chief administrator of a school, is that the principal is your pal. Believe me, Mr. Dahlstrom did not put the pal in principal. This was the second time that month I've been called to his office for something someone else did to me. Mr. Dahlstrom was big on punishing the victim. I believe this is the second time you've been in my office this month, Mr. Dahlstrom said to me, his eyes half closed. Is that right, Mr. Vey? That was the other thing about Mr. Dahlstrom. He liked to ask questions that he already knew the answer to. I was never sure if I was supposed to answer him or not. I mean, he knew the answer, and I knew the answer. So what was the point? Bottom line, it was the second time I had been locked in my locker by Jack Frains and his friends that month. This time, they put me in upside down, and I nearly passed out before the custodian unlocked my locker and dragged me down to Mr. Dahlstrom's office. Jack was like 17 and still in ninth grade. He'd been held back so many times he had a driver's license, a car, a mustache, and a tattoo. He sometimes calls himself Jackal, which is a pretty accurate description since both he and the animal he prey on smaller mammals. Jack had biceps the size of ripe Florida oranges and wasn't afraid to use them. Actually, he loved to use them all. He and his gang, Mitchell and Wade, watched Ultimate Fighting, and Jack took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu lessons at a gym not far from the school. His dream in life was to someday fight in the octagon, where he could pound people and get paid for it. "Is that right?" Mr. Dawson repeated, still staring at me. I ticked a dozen times and then said, "But sir, it wasn't my fault. They shoved me inside my locker upside down." He wasn't looking very moved by my plight, so I continued. "There were 3 of them, and they're a lot bigger than me. A lot bigger." My hope for sympathy was met by Mr. Dahlstrom's infamous stare of death. Really, you'd have to see it to understand. Last quarter, when we were studying Greek mythology, and we got to the part about Medusa, a Gorgon woman who could turn people to stone by looking into their eyes, I figured out where Mr. Dahlstrom had come from. Unfortunately, I hadn't the sense to keep my mouth shut about it, and blurted out, "That must be Mr. Dahlstrom's great-great-great-great-grandmother." Everyone in the class had laughed. Everyone except for Mr. Dahlstrom, who had picked that precise moment to slip into our class. I spent a week in after-school detention, which wasn't all bad because at least I was safe from Jack and his posse, who somehow never got sent to detention, no matter how many kids they stuffed headfirst into the lunchroom, garbage cans, or larked in their lockers. Anyway, they had officially put me on Mr. Dahlstrom's troublemaker list. "Mr. Vey, you cannot be stuffed into a locker without your consent," Dahlstrom said, which may be the dumbest thing ever said in a school. "You should have resisted. That's like blaming someone who was struck by lightning for getting in the way." "But I tried, sir." "Obviously not hard enough." He took out a pen. "Who are these boys who allegedly stuffed you into your locker?" Mr. Dahlstrom cocked his head to one side, his pen wagging impatiently in front of him. I stared at the pen in its hypnotic trajectory. "I'm waiting, Mr. Vey. Their names." There was no way I was going to tell him. First, he had already knew who had done it. Everyone knew Jack had put more kids than textbooks into lockers. Second, ratting out Jack was the shortest route to death. I just looked at Dahlstrom, my eyes blinking like crazy. "Stop twitching and answer my question." "I can't tell you," I finally said. "Can't or won't?" Pick one, I thought. I forgot who did it. Mrs. Dahlstrom continued staring at me through those half eyes closed of his. "Did you now?" He stopped whacking his pen and set it on the desk. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Vey. Now, you'll have to take their punishment as well. 4 weeks in after-school detention. I believe you know where detention is held." "Yes, sir. It's in the lunchroom." "Good. Then you'll have no trouble finding your way there." Like I said, Mrs. Dahlstrom excelled at punishing the victim. He signed a tardy excuse note and handed it to me. "Give that to your teacher. You can go back to your class now, Mr. Vey." "Thank you, sir," I said, not entirely certain what I was thanking him for. I walked out of his office and slowly down the long, empty corridor to biology. The hallway was lined with posters made by the Basketball Boosters Club, with messages like "Go Warriors," "Sink the Vikings," that sort of thing, rendered in bright poster paints. I got my backpack from my locker, then went to class. My biology teacher, Mr. Polson, a short, balding man with thick eyebrows and a massive comb-over, was in the middle of lecturing and stopped mid-sentence at my entrance. "Glad you decided to join us, Mr. Vey." "Sorry, I was at the principal's office. Mr. Dahlstrom said to give this to you." I handed him my note. He took the paper without looking at it. "Sit down. We're reviewing for tomorrow's test." Every eye in the class followed me as I walked to my desk. I sat on the second row from the back just behind my best friend, Austin Liss, who is one of the smartest kids in the universe. Austin's name looks European or something, but it isn't. His mother named him that because he was born in Austin, Texas. It was his private curse that she had spelled it wrong. I suspect that Austin was adopted because I couldn't figure out how someone that smart could come from someone who couldn't spell the name of the city she lived in. But even if Austin's mom wasn't the brightest crayon in the box, I liked her a lot. She spoke with a Texan accent and called everyone honey, which may sound annoying, but it wasn't. She was always nice and kept a supply of red licorice in her pantry just because she knew I liked it, and my mother didn't buy candy. Austin never got shoved into his locker, probably because he was wider than it. Not that Jack and his friends left him alone. They didn't. In fact, he has suffered the ultimate humiliation from Jack and his friends. He'd been pants in public. "How'd it go with Dahlstrom?" Austin whispered. I shook my head. Brutal. As I sat down, Taylor Ridley, who sat in the desk to my left, turned and smiled at me. Taylor is a cheerleader and one of the prettiest girls at Meridian. Heck, she's one of the prettiest girls in any high school anywhere in the world. She has a face that could be on the cover of a beauty magazine, long, light brown hair, and big brown eyes the color of maple syrup. Since I'm being completely honest here, I'll admit that I had a crush on her from the second I first saw her. It took me less than a day to realize that so did everyone else at Meridian. Taylor was always nice to me. At first, I hoped she was nice because she liked me, but really, she's just one of those people who was nice to everyone. Nice or not, it didn't matter. She was way out of my league, like 1,000 miles out of my league. So I never told anyone about my secret crush, not even Austin, who I told everything. Some dreams are just too embarrassing to share. Anyway, whenever Taylor looked at me, it made my tics go wild. Stress does that to people with Tourette's. I forced myself not to blink as I sat down and pulled my biology book out of my backpack. That's the thing about my tics. If I try real hard, I can delay them, but I can't make them go away. It's like having a bad itch. You can ignore it for a little while, but it's going to build up until you scratch. I've learned tricks to hide my tics. Like sometimes I'll drop a pencil on the ground, then when I bend down to get it, I'll blink or grimace like crazy. I'm sure the kids around me think I'm really clumsy because sometimes I'll drop my pencil 4 or 5 times in one class. Anyway, between Dahlstrom and Jack and Taylor, I was blinking like an old neon sign. Polson started up again. Okay, class. We were talking about electricity and the body. I think the body electric, said the poet Whitman. Who, pray, can tell me what role electricity plays in the body? He panned the room with his dusty gaze, clearly disappointed with the lack of participation. You better know this, people. It's on your test tomorrow. Electricity runs our heart, the girl with massive braces on the front row said. Correct, he said. And what else? Taylor raised her hand. It signals all of our nerves and thoughts. That's right, Miss Ridley. And where does this electricity come from? He looked around the room. Where does the electricity come from? Come on, people. It was dangerous when no one was answering because that's when he started hunching out those least likely to answer correctly. How about you, Mr. Morris? Batteries? The class laughed. Brilliant, Polson said, shaking his head. Batteries. Okay. Mr. Morris, perhaps it's time you changed your batteries because clearly yours are running down. Where does electricity come from, Mr. Fay? I swallowed. Electrolytes, I said. That would be true, Mr. Fay, if you were an electric eel. Everyone laughed again. Taylor glanced over at me sympathetically. I dropped my pencil on the floor. Austin raised his hand. Mr. Liss, Polson said, enlighten us. Austin straightened himself up in his chair like he was about to deliver a lecture, which he was. The human body generates an electrical current through chemical concentrations in the nerves in a process called bioelectrogenesis. Whenever a nerve signal is sent, potassium ions flood out our nerve cells, and sodium ions flood in. Both of these ions have slightly different charges, so the difference in ionic concentrations inside and outside the nerve cell creates a charge which our bodies process as electricity. Bravo, Mr. Liss. Harvard awaits. For those of you who have no idea what Mr. Liss just said, I'll write that on the board. Bioelectrogenesis. When Polson's back was turned, Austin turned around and whispered, What happened with Dahlstrom? Did Jack get detention? I shook my head. No, I got detention. His eyebrows rose. For getting shoved into your own locker? Yeah. Dahlstrom's a tool. That I know. Chapter 4. The Cheerleader. That Wednesday felt like one of the longest days in school ever. I had no idea that it wasn't even close to being over. After the final bell rang, Austin and I walked to our lockers, which were next to each other. Want to come over and play Halo? Austin asked. Can't. I got detention, remember? Oh yeah. I'll knock on your door when I get home. Austin and I lived just 2 doors from each other in the same apartment building. I won't be home. I have clogging lessons at 4. Ugh, I said. It was hard to imagine Austin doing any physical activity, but dancing with a bunch of 7-year-old girls wearing black patent leather tap shoes was like a bad car wreck. Gross. But you just have to look. You've got to get out of that, man. If anyone here finds out, you're ruined for life. I know, but the clocking teacher is my cousin, and mom says she needs the money, and I need the exercise. It's still cruel, I said, shutting my locker. I'll see you tomorrow. He put out his fist. Bones. Bones, I said, bumping his fist even though I was sick of doing it. I mean, it was okay the first million times. The hallways were crowded with students as I walked with my backpack down to the lunchroom. Miss Johnson, a young new English teacher, had just been assigned to supervise attention, which I thought was a good thing. She was reputed to be cool and nice, which I'd hoped meant she might let us out early. I walked up to her. I had to force myself not to tick. I'm Michael Vey. I'm here for detention. She smiled at me like I just arrived at a dinner party. Hi, Michael. Welcome. She looked down at a clipboard and marked my name on her roll. Go ahead and pick a table. The smell of lunch still lingered in the air, which was a punishment of its own, and I could hear the lunch workers behind the metal window screens preparing for tomorrow's disasters. There were 3 other students in detention, 2 boys and 1 girl. I was smaller than all of them, and the only one who didn't look like a homicidal psychopath. As I looked around the room for a place to sit, the girl looked at me and scowled, warning me away from her table. I found an empty table in the corner and sat down. I hated being in detention, but at least today it wouldn't be a complete waste of time. I needed to study for Polson's test. As I got my books from my pack, I noticed that my shoulder still hurt a little from when Jack had crammed me into the locker. I tugged on my collar and exposed a bright red scrape. Fortunately, I had gotten my fingers out of the way just in time to not have the door slammed on them. I wondered if anyone would call my mom about the incident. I hope not. She had a stupid job that she didn't like, and I didn't want to make her day any worse than it already was. Just 20 minutes into detention, Miss Johnson said, "All right, that's enough. Time to go." I scooped my books into my pack and threw it over my shoulder. "See you tomorrow," I said to Miss Johnson. "See you tomorrow, Michael," she said pleasantly, as if she looked forward to it. Outside the cafeteria, the halls were now empty except for the janitorial crew that had moved in and were pushing wide brooms up and down the tiled corridors. I stopped at my locker and grabbed the licorice I had stowed there after lunch, and looked forward to all day. I peeled back its wrapper and took a delicious chewy bite. Whoever invented licorice was a genius. I loved licorice almost as much as Rice Krispie Squares. I swung my pack over my shoulder, then walked out the south door, glad to finally be going home. I had just come around the corner of the school when Jack and his posse, Mitchell and Wade, emerged from between 2 dumpsters. Jack grabbed me by the front of my shirt. I dropped my licorice. "You headed us out to Dahlstrom, didn't you?" Jack said. I looked up at him, and my eyes twitching like crazy. I didn't tell him. "Yeah, right, you little chicken." Jack shoved me backward into a parantheta bush. As I fell all the way into it, sharp thorns pricked my neck, arms, and legs. The only place that I wasn't seeing was where my backpack was protected me. "You're going to pay," Jack said, pointing at me. "Big time." He turned to Mitchell, who was almost as tall as Jack, but not as broad-shouldered or muscular. Show him what we do to snitchers." "I didn't tell on you," I said again. "I promise." Before I could climb out of the bush, Mitchell pulled me up and thumped me hard on the eye. I saw a bright flash and felt my eye immediately begin to swell. I put my hand over it, trying not to lose my balance. "Hit him again," Jack said. The next fist landed on my nose. It hurt like crazy. I could feel blood running down my lips and chin. My eyes watered. Then Jack walked up and punched me right in the gut. I fell to my knees, unable to breathe. When I could finally feel my air with lungs. What? When I could finally fill my lungs with air, I began to groan. I couldn't stop blinking. "He's crying like a baby," Mitchell said joyfully. "Cry, baby, cry." Then came Wade. Wade West had yellow hair and a crooked nose. He was the smallest and ugliest of the 3, which is probably why he was the meanest, since he had the most to prove. I say we pants him. This was a specialty of Wade's. By pants, he meant to pull off my pants, the ultimate act of humiliation. Last year in 8th grade, Wade had pants Austin behind the school, pulling off his pants and underwear in front of a couple dozen classmates. Austin had to run home naked from the waist down, something he had never lived down. Yeah, Mitchell agreed. That'll teach him for ratting us out. No, I shouted, struggling to my feet. I didn't tell on you. Just then someone shouted, Leave him alone. Taylor Ridley was standing alone near the school door, dressed in her purple and gold cheerleading outfit. Hey, check out the cheerleader, Wade said. You're just in time to watch his pants, this guy, Mitchell said. Yeah, shake those pom-poms for us, Jack said, laughing like a maniac. Then he made up his own cheer, which was surprisingly clever for Jack. 2, 4, 6, 8. Who are we gonna cremate? He laughed again. Grab him. Before I could even try and get away, all three of them grabbed me. Despite the fact that my nose was still bleeding and I could barely see out of one eye, I went wild, squirming against their clamp-like grips. I got one hand loose and hit Jack in the neck, scoring only a dull thud. He responded by thumping me on the ear. Come on, you wimps, he shouted at Mitchell and Wade. You can't hold this runt? Get his shirt off. They pinned me face down on the ground, the weight of all three of them crushing me into the grass. Stupid little nerd, Mitchell said. You think you can rat on us and not pay? I tried to curl up so they couldn't take my clothes, but they are too strong. Jack pulled on my shirt until it began to tear. You leave him alone or I'll get Mrs. Shaw, Taylor shouted. She's right inside. Mrs. Shaw was the cheerleader's advisor and taught home economics. She was a soft-spoken, matronly woman, and about as scary as a throw pillow. I think we all knew that she wasn't actually inside, or Taylor would have just gotten her in the first place. Shut your mouth, Jack said. Hearing him talk that way to Taylor infuriated me. You shut your mouth, you loser, I said to Jack. You need to learn manners, Blinky boy. You need mouthwash, I said. Jack grabbed me by the hair and pulled my head around. You're going to be wishing you kept your mouth shut. He smacked me again on the nose, which sent a shock of pain to my body. At that moment, something snapped. I knew I couldn't hold back much longer. Let me go, I shouted. I'm warning you. Ooh, Wade said. He's warning us. Yeah, what you gonna do, Mitchell said. Cry on us? No, he's gonna wipe his nose on us, Wade laughed. He pulled off my shoes while Mitchell grabbed my waistband and started tugging at my pants. I was still trying to curl up. Stop struggling, Jack said, or we're going to take everything you got and make you streak home. Leave him alone, Taylor yelled again. Mitch, hurry and pull his pants off, Wade said. A surge of anger ran through my body so powerful I couldn't control it. Suddenly, a sharp electric zap pierced the air, like the sound of ice being dropped onto a hot griddle. Jack and his posse screamed out as they all fell to their backs and flopped about on the grass like fish on land. I rolled over to my side and wiped the blood from my nose with the back of my hand. I pushed myself up, red-faced and angry. I stood up at Jack, who was frothing at the mouth. I told you to leave me alone. If you ever touch me again, I'll do worse. Do you understand? Or do you want more? I lifted my hand. Terror was evident in his eyes. No, please don't. I turned and looked at his posse. Both of them were on the ground, quivering and whimpering. In fact, Wade was bawling like a baby and moaning. It hurts. It hurts so bad. I walked over to him. You bet it hurts. And that was just a little one. Next time you bully me or any of my friends, I'll triple it. As the three of them lay there groaning and quivering, I sat back on the ground, pulled on my shoes, and tied them. Then I remembered Taylor. I looked back over at the door, hoping she had gone inside. She hadn't. And from the expression on her face, I could tell she had seen everything. Bad news. My mother was going to kill me. But there was nothing I could do about that now. I grabbed my backpack and ran home. Chapter 5. Hiding the Evidence. By the time I got home, my left eye was nearly swollen shut. I set my backpack on the kitchen table, then went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eye looked like a ripe plum. There was no way of hiding it from my mother. I got a washcloth and wiped the blood off my nose and chin. My mother usually got home around 6:30, so I heated up a can of SpaghettiOs for dinner, grabbed the blue ice pack she kept in the freezer for her occasional headaches, then held the ice against my eye while I played video games with one hand. I know I should have been studying for my biology tests, but after a day like this one, I just didn't have it in me. I really didn't want to talk to my mom about my day, so when I heard her key in the door, I ran to my room, shut the door, turned out the lights, threw off my shirt, and crawled into bed. She called for me from the front room. Michael? 20 seconds later, she knocked on my door and then opened it. I pretended to be sleeping, but she didn't fall for it. Hey, pal. What are you doing in the bed? I don't feel good, I said. I pulled the covers over my head. What's wrong? She turned on my bedroom light and immediately saw my bloody, torn shirt on the floor and the blood on it. Michael, what happened? She walked over to my bed. Michael, look at me. I don't want to. Michael. Reluctantly, I pulled the covers down. Her mouth opened a little when she saw my face. Oh my. What happened? A lump came to my throat. Jack and his friends wouldn't leave me alone. Oh, honey, she said. She held me for a couple minutes, then she slowly sat back up. Did it happen? I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to upset her more than she already was. I'm sorry, Mom. I tried not to. But they wouldn't leave me alone. They're trying to pull my pants off. She gently brushed the hair back from my face. Stupid boys, she said softly. I could see the worry on her face. Well, they had it coming, didn't they? After a moment, she said, I'm sorry, Michael. I wish I knew what to do. Why won't they just leave me alone? My cheek was twitching, and she gently ran her thumb over it. Then she leaned forward and kissed my forehead. I wish I knew, son. I wish I knew. Chapter 6. The morning after. My radio alarm clock went off at the usual time, 7:11. I had my radio set to the morning zoo show. The host, Frankie, and Danger Boy were talking about people who suffered from banana phobia, the intense fear of bananas. I gently touched my eye. The swelling had gone down some, but it still ached. So did my heart. I felt like I had betrayed my mom, and I worried that we'd have to move again. The thought of starting over filled me with dread. I couldn't imagine how hard it would be for her. I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. You look pretty sorry, I thought. I showered and got dressed, then walked out to the kitchen. My mother was standing next to the refrigerator, dressed in her orange work smock. She was a checker at the local Smith's Food Mart. She was making waffles with strawberry jam and whipped cream. I was glad, not just because I loved waffles, but because it meant she wasn't mad at me. How's your eye? She asked. It's okay. Come here, let me see. I walked over to her and she leaned forward to examine it. That's quite a shiner. She pulled a waffle from the iron. I made you waffles. Thanks. I sat down at the table and she brought over a plate. Would you like orange juice or milk to drink? Can I have chocolate milk? Sure. She went back to the kitchen counter and poured me a glass of milk, then got a can of powdered chocolate from the cupboard and stirred some in. The sound of the spoon clinking against her glass filled the room. She brought the glass over to the table, then sat down next to me. So these boys who were picking on you, Jack and his friends, do I need to call their parents? I don't think Jack has parents. I think he was spawned. She grinned. What about the other boys? They crawled out of the sewer. So would it help if I called these sewer creatures parents? I cut a piece of waffle and took a bite. No, it would just make things worse. Besides, I don't think they'll be messing with me anymore. Do you think they'll tell anyone what happened? No one would believe them anyway. I hope you're right. She looked across the table. How are the waffles? Good, thanks. I took another bite. You're welcome. Her voice was pitched with concern. Did anyone else see what happened? I swallowed. A girl? What girl? She's in one of my classes. She was telling them to leave me alone when it happened. The look of anxiety on her face made my stomach hurt. After a moment, she stood. Well, I guess we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. She kissed me on the forehead. I better go. Want to ride to school? No, I'm okay. Just then there was a knock. My mom answered the door. Austin stood in the hallway. Hello, Mrs. Vey. Good morning, Austin. You're looking sharp today. Austin pulled in his stomach. He thought my mother was a babe, which made me crazy. Austin was 15 years old and girl crazy, which was unfortunate because he was short, chubby, and a geek, which is pretty much all you need to scare girls our age away. I have no doubt that someday he'll be the CEO of some Fortune 500 company and drive a Ferrari and have girls falling all over themselves to get to him, but he sure didn't know. Thank you, Mrs. Vey, he said. Is Michael ready? Just about. Come on in. He stepped inside, dwarfed by the size of his backpack. Hey, Austin, I said. He looked at my black eye. Dude, what happened? Jack and his friends jumped me. His eyes widened. Did they pants you? They tried. High school, my mother said. You couldn't pay me $1 million to go back. She grabbed her keys and purse. All right, you boys have a good day. Stay out of trouble. Thank you, Mrs. Vey. See you, Mom. She stood at the doorway. Oh, Michael, we're doing inventory at the store today, so I'll be late tonight. I'll probably be home around 8. Just make yourself some mac and cheese. No problem. You sure you don't want to ride? Austin almost said something, but I spoke first. We're fine, I said. Okay, see you later. She walked out. Your mom is so hot, Austin said as he sat down at the table. Dude, shut up. She's my mom. He pointed at my face. So, what happened? Jack thought I snitched him out to Dahlstrom, so he and his posse jumped me from behind the school. Wade, Austin said bitterly. You should have just zapped him. I put my hand over his mouth. Shut up. You know you're not supposed to know. I know. Sorry. He looked over at the door. She's gone anyway, he said defensively. His face brightened. Hey, I got the multimeter from my uncle so we can test you. Austin had this idea about measuring how many volts of electricity I could generate, which frankly, I was curious about too. Cool. Seriously, dude, I don't know why you hide your power. You could be the most powerful kid at school. Instead, you get beat up. Well, Jack and his friends won't be bothering us anymore. Austin's face brightened. Did you do it? Yeah. Cool. Man, I wish I had been there just to see you hand down the righteous judgment. I took another bite. If you were there, you'd have a black eye too. If Wade didn't pants you again. He frowned at the thought of it. So does your mom know you used it? Yeah. Did she freak? Yeah. But she was cool about it. She's worried that someone might find out. But she doesn't want me to get beat up either. They started it. I just finished it. Speaking of, are you going to finish those waffles? There's extra in the kitchen. Cool. My mom made gruel for breakfast. What's gruel? It's punishment. Really, dude. It tastes like wallpaper paste. I think they feed it to prisoners in Siberian gulags. Why does she make it? Because she ate it when she was a kid. But your mom's waffles? Oh, baby. The only thing better than how she looks is her cooking. Dude, just stop it. Austin shook his head. I was born in the wrong house. He threw 2 waffles on a plate, brought them over to the table, where he drowned them in the sea of syrup. Did anyone else see you do it? Taylor. Taylor Ridley? The cheerleader? Yeah. What did she do? She just stared. Wow. I wish I had been there. He took a massive bite of waffle, the syrup dripping down his chin. Did you study for the biology test? A little. In detention. How about you? Don't need to. It's all right here. He pointed to his head. Austin had a 4.0 grade point average only because the scale didn't go higher. If his body matched his brain, he'd be Mr. Universe. Do you have detention today? I have detention for the next 4 weeks, unless you can figure out a way to get me out of it. Maybe you should just shock Dahlstrom. Only in my dreams. Just then the front door opened and my mom leaned in. Michael, can you give me a hand? Sure. What's up? Just come outside. Need some help, Mrs. Bay? Austin asked. You stay put, Austin. I need to talk to Michael alone. Austin frowned. I got up and walked outside, shutting the door behind me. What's wrong? I left the car's dome light on all night, and the battery's dead. Can you give me a jump? Sure. I followed her out of the building, across the parking lot to our car, a 10-year-old Toyota Corolla. She looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she climbed inside and popped the hood. I lifted it to the rest of the way up, then grabbed the car's battery terminal. Go ahead, I said. The starter motor clicked until I pulsed, which is what they call what I do, pulse or surge, and the engine fired up. I let go of the battery. Mom raced the engine for a moment, then she stuck her head out the window. Thanks, honey. I shut the hood. Sure. Have a good day. She pulled out of the parking lot as I went back inside. Austin was still at the table finishing his waffles. What was that about? He asked, his mouth full. Car battery was dead. And you started it up? Yeah. That is so cool. At least my electricity is good for something. It's good as jack repellent, Austin said cheerfully. I looked at him and frowned. Stop eating. We're going to be late. He quickly shoved in 2 more bites, then stood. I threw my pack over my shoulder, then Austin and I walked up 5 blocks to school. Meridian High School was the 4th school I had been to since we moved to Idaho 5 years earlier. On our first day of high school, my mother had said to me, "Don't get in trouble, and don't hurt anyone," which I'm sure would have sounded ridiculous to anyone who didn't know my secret. I mean, I'm shorter than almost everyone at school, including the girls, and I never started problems, except by being small and looking vulnerable. When I was in 6th grade at Churchill Junior High, a bunch of wrestlers put me in a lunchroom garbage can and rode me across the cafeteria. It was chicken a la King Day, and I was covered with rice and yellow gravy with carrots. It took 5 minutes before I couldn't took it anymore, and I went off, as my mother called it. I wasn't as good as controlling back then, and one of the boys was taken to the hospital. The faculty and administration went nuts. Teachers questioned me, and the principal and the school police officer searched me. They thought I had a stun gun or taser or something. They went through my coat and pants pockets, and even the garbage can, but, of course, they found nothing. They ended their investigation by concluding that the boys had touched a power cord or something. None of the wrestlers got in trouble for what they had done, and all was forgotten. A few months later, my mom and I moved again.